When I was young, I was not a Christian at all, and I thought these people are foolish. And then I found out I became a Christian, and my life turned around. I went to a mainline cemetery in New York. The gifts that I had is being transformed.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying biblical billionaire principles. Our ultimate goal: to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away for MVPs. Hey, I'm your host today, Brett Swartz. In every episode, we are joined by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach the next level of faith, success, and impact. I'm excited about our next guest. He is out of Hollywood. In fact, founded in 1978, Good News Communication. He is the founder of that, initiated the Christian Film and Television Commission Ministry as a nonprofit advocacy group dedicated to redeeming the values of the entertainment media according to the biblical standards by influencing media executives to adopt higher standards and by informing and equipping the public, especially church-going Christian families. The CFTVC is the only registered Christian advocacy group in the Hollywood entertainment industry. And we're going to be speaking with the chairman at Christian Film and Television, Mr. Dr. Ted Baehr. Dr. Ted, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great because I'm talking to you,
Absolutely.
which
A
is
pleasure. Thank you
which
so
is a
much.
miracle.
We figured it out to log on to the Riverside. So thank you so much for being on the show. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Well, my story is that I grew up in the entertainment industry. My parents were stars, starting back in 1926, so we're almost on to 100 years. My father starred in 62 movies, and he won the box office award in 1936. And then after World War II, he starred in Broadway. The year I was born, 1946, he starred in Showboat, and then he starred all the way from 46 to 86 on Broadway. My mother died when I was young. I grew up as a Broadway brat, and when she died, I went off the deep end and did everything that I possibly could to be a brat and to be, to do all the drugs, the salacious activity, which I'm not going to define, and everything else. And then finally, at one point, four women, one of them single, came to Christ through Billy Graham. She gave Billy Graham Association $62 million when she came to Christ. And she had her eye on my father because he was starring on Broadway and very handsome, almost like you are. And so she started taking him to Christian events, and he'd take me to protect him, and I'd walk out after 10 minutes. And finally, one of them said, "Why don't you read the Bible and tell me what's wrong with it?" So after 6 months of saying, "I'm not going to do this," I went to Dartmouth, Cambridge, University of Bordeaux, and Toulouse. I had funded 5 feature films, which launched Canon Films that bought MGM. And I said, I don't want to become a Christian. And I thought, these people are foolish. And then I found out I became a Christian. And my life turned around. I went to a mainline cemetery in New York. Seminary, excuse me. And they own the rights to the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. We put on CBS television. We had 37 million viewers. I said, and I got an Emmy Award. I said, I don't need any of that. How can we change the industry? It had taken them 26 years. The average movie in Hollywood takes 13 years. So I said, if I can influence the industry in some other way, that'd be better. I met the man who was the head of the Protestant Film Commission. They kept movies clean during the golden age of Hollywood. When Mr. Smith went to Washington, it was a wonderful life, and the bells of St. Mary rang out. And so we adopted the policy of doing the movie reviews. I had been head of a department at City University, New York, and later I was head of a department at Berkeley. So we had 60 professors come together. So I analyzed movies in terms of 150 criteria, which depend upon how much money they're going to make. And we started showing Hollywood by doing good, they can make more money. And when we started, there was one movie with positive Christian content. And now Of the top 10 last year, I think it was 70%, 68.4% of the top 10. So we're very happy that things have changed. We get 89 million people coming to Movie Guide, which is great. Last month was our biggest month ever. And the other things we not only do we give great reviews at movieguide.org, which are analysis. We're not depending upon our preferences, but analysis. We work with studio heads. So every week this summer, we've had a group of students, and then we get the head of Legendary Pictures who did Dune and did $1.4 billion last year at the box office with Super Mario Brothers, and Chris Meledandri. Some of the top people in Hollywood come and teach, and they're all good friends. So we've been in the industry for a long time, and we've had a lot of blessings, and I get brokenhearted every time I see somebody investing in a movie because Hollywood is a big bank and nobody needs to invest in a movie. Hollywood pays for the movies, and that's what you have to learn to make money in the industry.
Wow, Dr. Ted Baehr, everybody, spelled Baehr. What a legacy already, and what a focus that you have here. And it's a story of redemption and a story of salvation. And I love that you shared that with us. Thank you for sharing that part of your life. And I want to focus like a laser on the topic here in a second, but I want to take one other step back. And the topic, by the way, that we're talking about today is how to succeed in Hollywood without losing your soul. Okay, we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But before we go there, Dr. Ted Baehr, I want to take one other step back. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and this life on earth, right? And these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others, right? And what going back to the times when you were a teenager or younger, Ted, what would you say is the one or two gifts that the Lord's given you, and how does that help you to help and bless people today?
Well, when I was when I was young, I was not a Christian at all, and I went to a lot of schools like University of Bordeaux in Toulouse, University of Munich, Cambridge University in England, Dartmouth College, NYU Law School. I was a card-carrying member of a communist organization, so I wouldn't think in terms of blessings. I got a lot of education. At one point, my sister, who was 9 years old, who was dating a test pilot for the X-planes for the Air Force. So I decided I want to go into NASA. So I worked for NASA for a year as a research engineer. And I would never qualify those things as being skills. I mean, or, gifts. The gifts that I had is being transformed. A week after coming to Christ, I married my wife, and we have 4 wonderful children and 18 wonderful grandchildren. And the gifts that I have today are just following the Lord and having a lot of great answers to prayers, which are miraculous all the time.
Amazing. I love that. I love the redemption story. It's beautiful. So with that in mind, let's dive right into the topic, right? What is the number one secret to how to succeed in Hollywood without losing your soul?
Well, if you look at movies as we do, which is very intense, we look at ontology, which is the nature of being. Um, let's say you're from some Eastern religion, which I dabbled in when I lived in India. You believe that everything is an illusion or it's not real, especially if you're Buddhist or Hindu. And those ontology, the average person in India knows that it's real. They have a tough life. They want to have a real life. Um, and if you're a Marxist, which I went through, you believe that everything's matter, so it doesn't matter if you kill a few Ukrainians or whatever. So the truth of the matter is that only Christianity and Judaism has a real ontology. That means that my wife died 2 years ago. She was on chemo for 26 years. She had a real problem, cicatricial pemphigoid, real pain, real suffering, and needed a real savior. So everybody in the world, I'll give you an example. When The Passion of the Christ came out, it did better per capita in Saudi Arabia than it did in the United States. So if you want to have a successful film, and if you look at the top grossing films, which we do with a detailed economic analysis, first it has to have a real nature of being. And then it has to have a real nature of how do we know? And lots of modern philosophies, you don't know why it would have a real nature of being. You have to, it's called epistemological realism. People are confused, they're relativistic, but we know because we can read the Word of God and it shows us. So, movies that have a real epistemology, we know what happened. As a friend of mine that I hired to do a project when I was working with ABC television way, way back, was a guy named Gene Roddenberry. And when he did Star Trek, he wanted to make sure that people knew that even if you're in the middle of outer space, everybody knew that everything there had the laws that governed them. So he had a month's worth of rehearsal, which the studios did not like, so that every time Spock pushed a button, you knew what was going on because you could see it. So they rehearsed it. So even in science fiction, you've got to have a real laws, real problems, real knowledge of what the solution is, and those grace even the best movies. So, and then it goes on from there to look at different elements that determine whether you're going to make money or not. The more you cohere with those 150 criteria, the more money you make. And at some point, I thought we had sent you our report to the entertainment industry, but that would help tremendously. A second point is that only about 10% of a movie is a script, about 10% of this production, and the rest of the movie is marketing. And many people don't understand marketing whatsoever. Um, the average Hollywood movie today costs $160 million. It's got to do 2.5 times negative cost to break even. That means that the theater takes 50%. So if it costs $160 million and you make $600 million, $300 million it goes to the theater, then 50% of the remainder is taken by the distributor under the best circumstances. So you have to understand, and the P&A for most of those movies is now up to $60 million. So when you release a little film, uh, I'm trying to approach this in a way that can help your audience better. Uh, a lot of films come out now from independents. About 60% of the films are released by independents, but they only make less than 10% of the box office. So 40% of the films come out from the majors and they make about 90% of the box office. The average week, you get 5 movies going out. I don't think you, Brett, look at 5 movies a week. Nobody looks at 5 movies a week. You might want to look at 1 movie a week, Inside Out 2 or whatever else. So a lot of these movies, the independent films, are just places that's like Steven Spielberg once said, when you if somebody asks you for money for a movie, it's like giving money to a homeless man and expecting him to pay you back. It's just not happening. So the key is, how do you develop the marketing, the distribution? How do you reach the audience? We teach all of that, and we've had a tremendous success. For instance, we give out a prize for movies that fit those criteria called the Kairos Prize. In the fullness of time, in 19 years of doing it, we've had 19 movies released in theaters by major distributors, which is an incredible track record. So we help people succeed. That's basically what we do.
Okay, so I'm gonna see if I've gathered that right. So, how to succeed in Hollywood without losing your soul? It sounds like number one is the ontology and understanding the real nature of being. Right, for example, Passion of the Christ. In Saudi Arabia, it did even better, per capita or whatnot than the U.S. Sounds like. And number two is understanding just the actual mathematics of this thing. Like 10% is the script, 80% is marketing, and figuring out ways to actually get it out there. Right. So, is that a fair summary so far? And then I guess what would be the next secret here to understanding
Yes,
how to?
that's very.
How,
But I'll give you an illustration of the marketing
okay.
problem. Um,
Okay.
a friend of mine, Jeffrey Katzenberg, of course, did DreamWorks, and they did some big movies, which were pretty good movies. But if he was to buy $50 million worth of advertising on ABC, who got the money? Walt Disney, because they own ABC. If he bought $50 million worth of advertising on NBC, who got the money? Comcast Universal, because they own NBC. And you can go down the line. So, in other words, he was paying his competitors to advertise his movies, Shrek or Shrek 2 or whatever it happened to be. And that's terrible. So, when you're an independent and you're paying your competitors to to do your movie, who's getting the benefit? Your competitors.
Got it. Right. That's key, right? Yeah, yeah. So then they have even more money to do the things that they're going to do. Got it. Right. So understanding that you're feeding your competitors. Okay. So what's the piece where once you understand, I guess, the logistics, you understand where the money's going, like bring this together for us, right? Like how do you succeed in Hollywood without losing your soul? Like what else haven't we touched on yet?
Well, Hollywood has a lot of looking for films that will do well at the box office. They make films for different groups. My wife was Argentine. They make films for Spanish-speaking groups. Tyler Perry, they make films for African American groups. Those films usually, and they never have gone over, I don't think they've gone over $100 million. So they know that they've got to make a Tyler Perry film with a limited budget, 10 million, 15 million, which if you have the 2.5 times negative cost routine, you can make money if you're going up to 60, 80 million. A lot of the films that are coming out of the faith-based market don't do that. But Hollywood says, here's a market. What we've told them is that every week you used to have 160 million people going to church every week, and you only had about 17 million people going to movies. Now you're down to about 114 million people going to church, but you only have about 8 or 9 million people going to movies. So you've got about 10 times more people going to church than movies. So it's just another box office. They make movies for teenagers, they make movies for girls, they make movies for women, they make movies for African Americans, they make movies for Koreans. So all we say is this is a gigantic audience base, and how are you going to make movies for that? And since, we tell them how to do that, that's why they come here and teach our classes for the students that we have during the summer, that everything's paid for. The students come and then they get jobs as executives in the industry. But those industry are always looking for movies. The majority of movies, scripts that are picked up by the industry, come over the transom. They're not movies that they developed in-house. They're movies that some smart person like Brett has decided that he's going to write. And so if you write a good script, they want that script and they're looking for it. And the other week we had the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, last week at Netflix, who also makes the final decision because he's got to put in the money for a Netflix movie, talking to the class last week about why Netflix chooses these movies and how to get these movies into the system. So they want movies that'll reach a gigantic audience.
Okay, got it. And by the way, you can learn more and check out everything that Dr. Ted is talking about and doing at movieguide.org. That's movieguide.org. So, Ted, now I guess maybe try to land the plane here with us here on this one. So, I'm thinking about if the listeners listening right now, how does faith and values in living a life of integrity? How are you doing that in the movie industry, right? From a Christian perspective, walk us through as you're navigating the logistics, the money, the marketing, the players, the competitors, right? Like bring that to like it's got to be tough because you're in there's you're the guys you're the only real Christian advocacy that's all in Hollywood, it sounds like, right? So bring that together for us on how you're best doing that every day and teaching others to do the same.
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that Hollywood has always had people from various different faith groups. In the 1890s, in 1897, you had the first Passion play done by, I think, the Pathé brothers or the Lumiere brothers. The next year, you had two Passion plays and a nativity story. The majority of movies up until the 1910s were morality tales, The Perils of Pauline. My mother starred in one of those later. And so you had a group of people who were making movies that were broad audience at that time. And then you got the Nickelodeon people coming in, and it changed a little bit. But there's always been good people. Cecil B. DeMille, who made some of the biggest movies ever, he was one of the top three owners of Paramount Pictures. The other two were not Christians. His father was a minister. His father used to read him a passage of the Bible every day, a passage of history. That's why he made Ben-Hur and all these great movies. Um, and Cecil B. DeMille was drawing so much money that Paramount decided at one point where we don't want to associate him with because he's a Christian. And he went over to Warner Brothers, made a tremendous amount of money for Warner Brothers. So Paramount said, please come back. We'll give you anything you want. We'll build your own studio for you. We'll give you whatever you want. He said, I want my extras. And they said, no, we can't give you your extras. And finally, he got everything he wanted. So Hollywood has always had to recognize, the good, the true, and the beautiful. If you're thinking about it in a very simplistic term, you always had great cowboy stars. My father starred in 9 cowboy movies. He was the first Texas Ranger, but you had Gene Autry after him, and Roy Rogers, who took my father's place at the studio after my father left the cowboy movies. So you've always had good people in Hollywood. And there are a lot of good people who are in the top positions in Hollywood today. But you hear about the negative. The news media is always hyping what the negative problems they have. And of course, they're negative problems. Jesus says that the wheat and the chaff are going to grow up together. So you're always going to have people that are going in the wrong direction. Once in a while, those movies make money. Most of the time, they don't make any money at all. Um, I can look up the figures, but it would take me away from the camera. Um, but last year, let's say, I'm going to give you a ballpark from my memory. Movies with positive faith content did about $36 million on average of all the movies released, and movies with anti-Christian content did about $5 million. So that means you're not going to be making much money by going to the other one. Where do you want to put your money if you want to, if you want to be able to succeed? And it just doesn't. The biggest audience out there is the faith audience, and of course that includes all the other groups. Um, and they're good people out there. I mean, if you come and spend a week with us, you'll meet a lot of them. You should come to our gala on February 7th. They all come. We have heads of Amazon, a friend of mine who was doing a faith-based movie that he just finished shooting in Oklahoma. 2 Amazon people were there. They decided to pick it up. Um, the Irwin brothers were there. Amazon gave them a deal for Wonder Studios. I mean, it's an incredible event. And one of the Amazon guys, when he got up to talk about Rings of Power, talked about his faith. So there's a lot of good people. You just don't read about them in Variety or Hollywood Reporter or the New York Times or the Washington Post.
Okay, wow, that's great. That's so insightful. And it sounds like there's always been a remnant, and the media is typically, as they do with, not even just Hollywood, but it's the negative things or the challenging things. They're hyping those things up, and there's always been a faith based, and the ones that are Christian values are the ones that are succeeding much more. By the way, we're speaking with Dr. Ted Baehr. He is the chairman at Christian Film and Television out of Hollywood, and you can check out more of what they're doing at movieguide.org. That's movieguide.org, analysis on all things movies and reviews and streaming and different things. Cool. You have a cool section on these articles on parenting tips to navigate an ever-changing media environment. Are kids still interested in pro sports, or do video games take over? Is it really that important to read your Bible? Set your child up for success with those screen time facts. Don't give your kids phones before high school. Here's why. A lot of wisdom and a lot of practical application on reviews, on streaming, on TV series, a top 10 list of the year, genre, Hollywood theme. What haven't I asked you so far, Mr. Ted Baehr, that I should ask you and you want to answer for the audience?
Well, the most important audience for movies is children between 14 and 24. They're the big audience. Why are they the big audience? People often ask. Well, because they're single, they want to go on a date, they don't want to stay at home because their parents are there, so they go to the theater. And that audience determines what's made. And so you need to help. You just mentioned the parenting articles. We need to teach them to be media wise, to want to choose the good and reject the bad. And we know how to do that. And the interesting thing is, for a movie guide, of course, our biggest audience is women, mothers of children, but one of our biggest audiences is young women, young girls between 14 and 24. When I did my testimony on Movie Guide, I think the next day it was like 1,000,002. 90% were young men, 60% came to receive Christ. So that big audience needs to be reached. We need to be able to help them make wise choices, and we have the tools to do that. When I was going through what I make a joke that it's cemetery. When I was going through seminary, I supported myself by being head of the TB Center at City University of New York. We got 60 professors together. We developed the first media literacy course, and we've used that for years to help parents to choose the good and reject the bad. And we have some great people updating it right now on that
What's the
course.
number one tip to do that? Like practically, Dr. Ted, like what would you say is like, yeah, as a parent listening right now, and they have a kid between the ages of 6 and 15, right? They're in the house, they're right there. Like what was the best way to help them teach their children to consume and want the good and reject the bad?
Well, number one, you've got to get them to ask the right questions. But before you do that, you've got to look at their stages of cognitive development. When they're the first few years, every child medical association said they shouldn't be watching anything. Once they turn into 3, 4 year olds, then you've got to be careful because they're in the imagination stage. That means they see it and they encode it and they take it as being their scripts of behavior. The next stage is when they move beyond that is called the concrete stage. All of this is presented to you. But I'll give you an example because examples are better. I was talking, Lily, my wife, who died 2 years ago, who was on chemo for 26 years, had over 30 doctors. And I was talking to one medical person, and she sounded very nervous. And I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "My daughter is cutting. She was very attractive, hyper thin." I said, "How old is she?" And she said, "About 16, I think." I said, "Well, then she's in the self reflection stage of cognitive development. I'll send you my book. Have your daughter read it because if you read it to her, she's going to rebel against it." So her daughter read the book. Her life turned around. She stopped cutting, and she was in a public high school, and she started counseling her friends to stop cutting because that's one of the major problems that women are having today and rejection of the society. So we know how to teach people how to be media wise, and we know how to reach kids. And you have to ask, who is the hero? Is the hero somebody who solves the plot problem like Hacksaw Ridge by saving people? Or is the hero somebody who solves the plot problem by, wiping people out in cruel and horrible ways? And that encodes as the script of behavior. Um, who is the villain? And used to be before when we started that the villain was quite often some priest with a collar on and poltergeist, and that's changed. Now you see them as being positive characters, which I'm very grateful for. You see a few horror movies that include them as negative characters, but very, very few. So we've seen a lot of changes in this. Then you have to ask, what is the worldview? How do you determine who's going to win or lose? What is the premise is extremely important. But these are all questions that you have to learn how to develop and how to ask your kids and to sit down with your kids and watch them. University of Toronto did a study years ago where they were showing freshmen very salacious material. They found out as soon as the teacher came into the room, it changed completely. The problem is that most parents are overworked. Both parents are working, they don't have time. There was a psychologist a couple of years ago who was presented with a lot of kids who had what they claimed was ADHD, and the school wanted to put them on drugs. And he said, "No, give me 2 months and they won't need drugs." And for those 2 months, he said, limit the amount of time that they're playing on their computers or whatever they're playing on. Um, Give them more of your time. Take them outside, play with them, give them wholesome diets. He went through all sorts of to get them to bed by 9. I'm just remembering this, and all the details are in the books and online. After 2 months, every one of the kids had been cured, or 90% of the kids had been cured of their ADHD problem. They didn't need drugs. And 10%, and I'm giving you rough figures right now, still had the problems. And the parents said, well, we don't have time to play with our kids outside. We don't have time to talk to them about these issues. So it's up to the parent. And I feel sorry for most parents because they're facing a deluge of their own problems and all of the time that's being drained from their lives in trying to make a lot of money, billions, as you say, behind you. But it's easier. We can show you ways to do that without losing your soul.
We're speaking with Dr. Ted Baehr, Baehr, and so much wisdom here and so much more to check out on movieguide.org. That's movieguide.org. You want to go there. Again, parenting tips, very practical, laid out here from someone who's on the front lines in their group that's on the front lines to with children, right? With children, with movies, with psychology, with connections. It's so important to have that. Dr. Ted Baehr, we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
I didn't hear your last statement. I'm sorry, Brett.
I said we're running out of time. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget make sure to tell yourself to do?
The one thing to tell myself to do.
If you
Listen,
were 20 years old, you can go back.
when I was 20 years old, you don't want to hear about it. I mean, I did a lot of drugs. Soon thereafter, when I was at law school, I was living with four women at the same time. I was not the guy you want to talk about. And I had no desire to become a Christian or to live a moral life or to do anything else. That's one reason I became a Marxist, because that allows anything goes. So when I was 20 years old, you wouldn't have wanted to know me.
So you would have told yourself to turn it around sooner, right? Or to follow the Lord sooner. Is that the answer?
Yeah, I think that what I would have said is I wish I had heard the gospel before that
Yeah.
time. I mean, I was
Yeah.
living the high life. I grew up on 120 acres. I belonged to the oldest yacht club in America. I, was doing TV commercials and things as a kid. I would have been happy if I had heard the gospel earlier, but I didn't. And one of the things that's good about
Good.
that is that I was talking to one of the heads of Paramount Pictures, and he said, "Oh, this is a great." I mean, he was going to make a movie on something a little salacious, and he said, "This is a great story. You should make a movie about it." I said, "No, it's just for me to share with you." And he changed. He decided not to make that movie. He started making good movies. We've had a lot of people come to, and I can relate to the people in Hollywood because I went through all of those stages. So, I'm not anxious to get over those things. It gave me the ability to talk to people that are living in a world that they don't have any moral boundaries.
God bless you for sharing that and continue to keep up that fight, right? To share the gospel and redemption stories so people know there's hope outside of the fleeting pleasures of sin. So, next question. Number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
I read a lot of books, in fact, um, the, let's see. Let me. I mean, my number one book of all time is the Bible. That's an easy answer for you. I love Augustine, The City of God, but I read that before last year, and I'm reading three books right now. One of them is by a relative, Christina Baehr, and it's the Tales of Ormdale, and they're now bestsellers on Amazon. So she got the Rich and Famous contract. Um, so the Tales of Ormdale are absolutely great, and they're about a young woman in the 1890s, um, navigating a very difficult world. Beautiful books.
Okay. Next question. Thanks for sharing that. What are you most curious about right now?
Excuse me?
What are you
I
most
have
curious
hearing.
about? Yeah. What are you most curious about right now?
Well, I'm curious about it. The age of 78 and being having so many people come to Movie Guide and being so blessed, and I travel all the time. How long can I keep doing it? I mean, that's the curious point. Amazon flew me 2 weeks ago. They said, we want you to go to see our movie that we're shooting in Greece. They picked me up at 2:45 a.m. in my house. They drove me to the airport. They flew me to Greece. I got in there on Monday at 11 a.m. I spent 2 days doing interviews and set visits, and then I got up at 4 a.m. and flew back to LA and got there at 12:30 a.m. So, and tomorrow, this week, I go to Australia. I'll be speaking at a movie studio in Sydney. I come back from that, and I got to go back and speak in Greece. I say, how long can I do this? I've got two more books that I'm doing. I've written over 42 books, so these will be 43 and 44. Somebody just said they'd like to, be my ghostwriter, and they said all their books get a gigantic amount of, money in the upfront, which I'm not sure they can do that. But I'm extremely busy, so I'm curious, how long can I continue to be so busy? And I love it, but I've got 18 grandkids. When I go to Australia, I've got 10 grandkids there, so I'll take one out to lunch every day to get to know them.
Amazing. Love it, Dr. Ted Baehr. I love the 78 and still going really strong. Really, the last question, this kind of wraps it up and we'll finish out here today. And it really has to do with the practicing stewardship over ownership, not only mindset, but daily, right? So, as a Christian, how do you practice stewardship over ownership? And leave us with some encouraging words before we go.
Well, I trust God to provide for all my needs. And, you I've traveled, I've spoken at Parliament in England, I've spoken at the European Union. I went to Norway, spoke at the Parliament. I got Norway disengaged from having to take Swedish programs because Norway is more family friendly. I've just had tremendous blessings, but I've kept the same salary, if you want to be a steward, for years, which is very low. I won't mention it to you because I'm not concerned about that. As I said, my father was a star. Grew up on 120 acres. I had all the tchotchkes and things that you would want in life. So stewardship to me is just trusting God to provide for all your needs according to His riches and glory.
Amen and amen. Hey, Dr. Ted, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, your insights. I want to encourage you to keep making an impact within Hollywood to help people, parents, filmmakers, stars, all of it. Make movies that are going to be edifying. They're going to be positive. They're going to be filled with Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, to make money, but also to make a bigger impact on society. What you're doing is special and is unique and is so needed. So thank you for what you're doing. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, one last time, what's the best place for them to find you?
It's movieguide.org, and you can get me there easily because I don't hide from anybody. And this has been a great interview, so I want to thank you. And you really could be doing us on TV or on one of the channels that we deal with all the time. And
Oh,
someday, come to our Movie Guide Awards Gala, February 7th. I think you'd love it. And you could be on the red carpet and you see a lot of stars and you should connect with them. So we'd love to help you.
wow, that'd be an honor. I'll talk to my wife, and I think we would have a really fun time doing that. So thank you so much, Dr. Ted. God bless you, and also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build It to Billions podcast. As always, we guide successful entrepreneurs or bring on people like Dr. Ted to give us wisdom to help guide us, right? Entrepreneurs, investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with a mindset of practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Ultimate goal to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. I'm Brett Swartz. I appreciate everyone listening out there. Please share this with someone today. It can be an encouragement too. Please rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment, anything that could support the show. We so appreciate everyone out there, and we will talk to you again real soon. Bye now. All right, that's a wrap.